America is learning so much right now. Women with Black women, the D9, HBCU life and
Oh, God.
culture.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
everybody keeps saying, is America ready for, to elect a Black woman president? And I'm like,
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if America's ready. We're ready. So y'all better go ahead and catch up.
Hey, y'all. Welcome to The Amendment, a weekly conversation about gender, politics, and power from the 19th News and Wonder Media Network. I'm your host, Erin Haynes. So, I don't know where you've been, but just to get us all caught up, on Sunday afternoon, President Joe Biden dropped out of the 2024 presidential race. It was a historic move. No president has ever withdrawn their bid for re-election so late in the race. And 30 minutes later, Biden formally endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris to succeed him at the top of the ticket. Now, over the past few days, many Democratic Party officials have voiced their support for Vice President Harris, and should she get the nomination and win in November, her ascension to the presidency would also mark many historic firsts. But look, there's a lot that needs to happen before we get there. So to unpack this incredible moment, I'm turning to one of my most trusted friends and brilliant political minds. Joining us today is social justice activist, author, educator, podcaster, amazing mom, et cetera, Brittany Packnett Cunningham. Brittany, welcome to The Amendment.
Hey, boo. Thanks for having me.
Listen, thanks for being here. I mean, just in general, but also today. Let's get into it. Look, we've been watching this. Pressure had been mounting for months for President Biden to drop out of the race. There were questions about his age even before the disastrous debate performance last month. So, what do you think really pushed him over the edge into making this historic decision?
Listen, I think that he understood that winning and defeating Donald Trump had to be the priority of the day. And if no matter how hard you've worked, no matter how much you've stood in front of reporters for 90 minutes and answered questions back to back to back, if you've lost the confidence of the folks that are supposed to be your partners in this, then it's time to step aside. And I'm very sure that was a difficult decision. I mean, he has been in public service and elected leadership much of his life. And I also don't think he would have made the choice if he were not deeply confident in Vice President Harris. I think we need to recognize that it was an unpopular choice to commit to picking a woman as his vice president. It was an unpopular choice internally, right? Like not with the people, but with the political bourgeoisie, if we will. It was unpopular,
Absolutely.
Right, to commit to picking a woman of color. It was unpopular to pick a Black woman named Kamala Harris and ensure that she would be the next vice president of the United States, a Black and South Asian woman. And so here we are, where he has defied the odds to help not only make history, but bring a younger perspective, more progressive perspective, the perspective of a child of immigrants, right? And he's not going to do that if he does not trust her judgment and trust her leadership. And so I think that when he gave that endorsement, he meant it. It was a full-throated endorsement. It was clear. It was early and immediate. And I think that that was significant to a lot of people. And we've seen the party really coalesce around the vice president following President Biden's lead.
Yeah. And look, the president has been consistent, right? I mean, even, he chose her when he gets into office. He says, we are going to be true partners. This is the person who I want to be the last person in the room with me as I make, we are making decisions. This is our administration, like tying the Biden-Harris, administration together long before there was a Biden-Harris, kind of ticket for this reelection campaign, reaffirmed her. I mean, just as recently, when he was in Las Vegas at the NAACP convention, he was talking about her leadership even then as he was, kind of contemplating what his, future was going to be in terms of reelection. And so, you could see that that endorsement came from, what felt like certainly a genuine place in terms of their relationship and his confidence in her, from the very beginning to up until this very moment. So, he pretty quickly endorsed Kamala Harris. Like I said, I mean, the tweet about the vice president came out, I think, like about a half an hour after, he announced that he was stepping aside, right? And then, you had a lot of Democratic leaders quickly getting behind this decision, while others have kind of advocated for this more open primary approach. What was interesting, I was coming out of Milwaukee. And, the thing about the Republican National Convention was that atmosphere really had this kind of air of inevitability. And then as you saw people start to line up behind Vice President Harris Monday, into Tuesday, the air of inevitability, really kind of vanished, and the momentum kind of really seemed to shift in her direction. So I had been long advocating, even when the conversation first kind of began after the debate
Right.
debacle, should he step aside? Who should be his successor? To my mind, the sitting vice president was sitting right there, most qualified person to my mind to really step into this role, right? And not just because it would be political suicide to throw the Black woman who had made history over the side, but because she had been leading and she had been literally mirroring this man for 3.5 years, and so she has been training for this. I mean, literally, like she is the in case of emergency person,
absolutely.
right? And this, for Democrats, this is an emergency.
Right.
But there were certainly people who were looking all over the place,
under rocks, over mountains, in the valley.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron Sorkin fanfic. I mean, we had it all by the end. But it felt to me like she made sense as the likely successor and the person that certainly the president was in support of, but also just the person that should be, in this position as front runner now. And yet this still, in some circles, is a conversation. I wonder what you make of that. And I wonder what you think about the case for her leadership moving forward.
Well, it's interesting because to so many reports, she hasn't just been mirroring him, she's been pushing him. That there were This is a woman who signed on to the Green New Deal when she was in the Senate, right? And has always been to the left of President Biden on climate issues. And here is this president passing one of the most consequential pieces of climate legislation that we've ever seen. And he acknowledges, right? The insiders acknowledge that was both partnership and her bringing her perspective to bear on that was even a bit further than his. And so I think it's important that we recognize early on, President Biden said he was going to be a bridge candidate. Now, we did not know that this is what it was going to look like, but that bridge helps bring us from near utter destruction back to stability and toward the future. Has everything been perfect? Has everything been stable? Has everything been the way that I and many others have wanted it to be, especially internationally? Absolutely not. And yet we now have an opportunity sitting in front of us where we can actually decide to move forward as a country, right? Decide to take an open opportunity to do something that's never been done before in a way that's never been done before, and therefore pursue policy and imagination and the future in a way that we haven't done before. So I think that it was wise for the party to finally get behind her in that, especially because it would have been difficult. It would have been problematic, frankly, for the whole country and our future if we were not ready to embrace something this forward thinking. It's also interesting to me because I was feeling deep frustration, irrespective of who the candidate is, what she believes, the fact that she is a Black and South Asian woman, irrespective of all of that. I had an intense problem with the idea that some people with a lot of money and some people who've been in party leadership for a long time get to sit on signal chats and in back rooms and on private calls and make a decision for the American people when 14 million people had showed up to the primary and voted for the Biden-Harris ticket. Those 14 million people reasonably expected that if Biden were to step aside in any circumstance, whether from the office or from the campaign, that she would be the one to step in. And 14 million people said, yes, this is what we want to happen. So for people to be able to subvert democracy in that way, an imperfect democracy, but democracy nonetheless, because they got enough money and they have enough clout to make that happen, I have a problem with that. A lot of voters had a problem with that. And I don't believe that should ever be something that we're comfortable or okay with. There's already too much money in politics. Let's not let wealthy donors have even more control than they already do.
Yeah, I mean, you're making such a good point, especially in a year where we're talking about the integrity of our democracy, right? And what that means, and voter integrity, frankly, and voter agency,
voter integrity, and the validity of our democratic and government institutions. People don't have faith in the Supreme Court because they're watching justices subvert ethical boundaries all the time. They don't have faith in Congress because it took them forever to even name a speaker. They're frustrated about the lack of transparency at the local, state, and federal level. So if people don't even trust the institutions that, whether or not we like them or not, will still govern our lives, we have a crisis on our hands. And that crisis of a lack of validity and belief is one that has to be faced head on. And it means that the modicum of democracy that we're experiencing now has to be preserved so that we can actually create more.
And I mean, I guess to your point about the process, I mean, literally, we find out, overnight that Vice President Harris has secured the delegates, right? That she needs for this
and a whole lot of money.
Well, we'll get to that. The presumptive nominee, right? So, I mean, the concerns that President Biden's immediate endorsement of her, or kind of party elites coming, consolidating around her, kind of anoints her as a leader. Even though the vice president said, she intends to earn and win the nomination. She's certainly been working very hard over the last 72 hours, right, since this news kind of became official. But that the sitting vice president needed to earn this, I thought was very interesting, and kind of more telling about this process and what does that really mean. She's made pretty quick work of sewing this up pretty far ahead of the Democratic National Convention next month.
That's right. And I will be in attendance to that convention.
Same.
See you there. It'll definitely be a time, an historical moment. And I'm interested to see not only how the party continues to coalesce around her, but how they coalesce around a platform that really looks toward the future. Coalesce around a platform that brings an end to genocides, right? And I say genocides plural. Coalesce around a platform that protects and preserves reproductive justice and access to abortion, that really protects our ability to learn freely, right? Because all these books are getting banned and the teachers are getting fired for talking about the truth, and to actually protect the one environment and earth that we have, so that we can reverse as much harm as possible and actually move forward in a way that keeps us all safe. There's so many more issues that are on the ballot for all of us, right? It's jobs, it's the economy, it is people's health and safety. There are so many things on the ballot, and the excitement that the Democratic Party is experiencing now is because they gave people something new and future forward to believe in. I'm hopeful that the party actually takes that signal and says, let's keep going with this momentum, because it's bigger than one person and one candidate. It is about the fact that people have something new to believe in, that there's some hope for some change, for some forward movements, for some progression, not just fixing what was broken, but actually moving us forward collectively. And so I know that party politics are thick and weird and funky, but I'm still hoping that the energy that the people have brought and the ways that the people have expressed very clearly that we want something new and fresh to fight for, and new and fresh folks and ideas to fight for us. I'm hoping that that's the name of the game in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, kind of what happens in Chicago. So we'll be watching. You brought up money, and I want to talk about that because, listen, a practical benefit of having the vice president lead the party's ticket is that, she's got access to the funds that the Biden campaign has already raised. And so the campaign said in the first 24 hours, it raised a whopping $81 million. So, for everybody who was kind of speculating about whether she was going to be able to generate excitement or enthusiasm, I mean, to the extent that money is an indication of that, I think we have our answer. And I also just want to talk about one of the secret weapons, Win with Black Women. I was on that marathon call. We were among the 44,000. I think you were on there too, right? Listening in, and you and I have listened to that call many a Sunday, right? We know that this was something that was 4 years in the making.
That call is so special. And I remember when our dear sister friend, Joe Take It Edie, started calling around to some of us and said, look, we need to really organize. And we're talking about 2020. So organizing looks different. We can't go all sit in a room together and meet. We got to get on the Zoom. We have to get on our Zoom and we got to talk about the things that
it was
matter.
The middle of the pandemic. Right? That's right.
And I remember that very first meeting, there were maybe a couple dozen of us who were committed to defeating Trump, to forcing America to deal with the ways in which at that time, Senator Harris was being attacked, right? And so really the orientation was to fight back against the misogynoir, to fight back against that unique intersection of racism and sexism that were coming at her hard, that had been coming at her during the presidential primary. The disinformation, the misinformation, the ways in which she particularly was targeted and the communities from which she comes were particularly targeted. We said we would be remiss and it would be malpractice for us to have all these skills, talents, platforms, resources, and not come together and fight back, right? Because fighting against that for her is fighting against that for all of us. And the first
Yeah.
call was, maybe a dozen or two people. The second call grew. The third call grew. By the time of the
Yeah.
election, that call was already several hundreds of women. And
Yeah.
what Joe Taka so brilliantly created in that space was really an organizing body for lots of things, right? Because Win with Black Women made the Color Purple remake highly successful, right? Win with
Yep.
Black Women has gotten local, state, and other federal leaders elected, right? Into Congress, into mayor's offices, into governor's offices. That call, if you have an
Definitely.
appeal to make to Black women, that call is the place to
That's the
be.
call to be
If you're
on.
trying to get us to watch a movie, to buy something, to vote for somebody, to vote against somebody,
Yeah.
that Sunday night call at 8:30 has been the place you have to be for 4 years. When I've run different campaigns, I have gone back to the group I was a part of and said, "Hey, can I count on you all support?" And the answer has always been consistently yes, right? And it ebbs and
Yeah.
flows, but that's why we build teams and not saviors, right? That's why we make sure that when you have to tap out, there's somebody there to tap in. And that's what Win with Black Women is, because if we're all doing it together, then there's not too much pressure on any single person. And so it's good
Yeah.
to see that the colored girls, the Donna Brazile and Leah Daughtry and Mignon Moore and Yolanda Caraway don't have to do it on their own, right? It's and
Yeah.
carry as much
'Cause
as
they tired.
they tired, child. They've been carrying a whole lot. It's good to see that Cora Masters Berry doesn't have to be in the fight as heavy as she once was, because she's got sisters of all generations that she can lean on. It's good to see that Dr. Janetta Besh Cole can be feeding her wisdom to multi-generational calls every week and make sure that younger and younger generations are heeding the wisdom of our Black women elders. And so that call has always been a special place. And then the same day that Biden announces he's dropping out, the same day that Biden endorses President Harris, we're going to go ahead and claim it, Vice President Harris, the day that she formally launches her campaign for president, to excitement and fanfare and hope, to have that call already be scheduled for that day. For the COO of Zoom, one of our Indian sisters, having to step in and actually expand our ability to move the call from 1,000 to 10,000 to then the 44,000 that we're on.
Yeah.
To be witnessing and experiencing that moment in history together is, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. It is a moment I will never forget.
No, it was historic.
It was. We were standing fully in our power. We were standing fully in the honor it is to be a part of the sorority of Black womanhood. And we were standing fully in the ownership that we have to take over how much we already command what the world is and can be, right?
Yeah.
So instead of just talking about it, we were all on the call being about it. And, that call, like you said, has already raised $2 million. The Black men's call the next day, which I crashed, by the way, just to thank them for showing up, raised, $1.5 million. There's so when we talk about that $81 million, a whole bunch of it came from Black people. A whole bunch of it came from disciplined, organized Black people who you can expect to continue to see over these next 4 months and after the election, to make sure that our agenda is followed through on. All these small dollar donors who came together to say, hey, the big wigs and the wealthy folks don't get to choose for us. We get to choose for us. That's meaningful. And I really hope the party is listening.
There were so many people that just immediately recognized what that moment was and wanted to be a part of it. The 44,000 on Zoom, that was just the beginning. There were another 30,000, I think, on Clubhouse. There were people that were on Zoom that were putting Zoom on speakerphone. And
there were 5,000 people who signed up to organize in their state. Like, people are getting to work.
And that's the thing, right? I mean, that is a call that is also about a call to action, and it mobilizes Black women. I mean, it is a place of community, but it is also a place where folks are taking their marching orders. So you and I certainly know that Women with Black Women was nothing new, although a lot of folks in the mainstream media certainly found out about it on Sunday night. So
we've been here.
Yeah, exactly. So I've actually got a story that's going up, just kind of educating some folks about what Women with Black Women is.
America is learning so much right now. Women with Black women, the D9, HBCU life and
Oh God.
culture. Like
Yes, absolutely.
everybody keeps saying, is America ready for, to elect a Black woman president? And I'm like, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if America's ready. We're ready. So y'all better go ahead and catch up.
You mentioned the misogynoir, and we've already seen, kind of the Trump campaign's response, former President Trump's response. He's
Yeah.
attacking the vice president as, dumb, as too liberal, as a liar, of all things. We've been here before, obviously, especially with Trump and his playbook, particularly towards women. 2016, the entire 2024 primary, yesterday. I guess, how are you seeing these attacks? Certainly, Black women are a lot more prepared, or even more
Yes.
prepared than we were, 4 years
Indeed.
ago. How are you looking at this, and what do you think they mean?
Well, certainly Black women are more prepared, right? I'm seeing so many texts in our group chats and posts that people are sending around to each other, reminding us that we don't have to receive the inputs of hatred that consistently come toward us, that we can choose to tap out of social media spaces or watching news spaces that continue to amplify those attacks on Vice President Harris and therefore on all of us. And we can choose to tap into the things that are productive, that are progressive, that are moving us forward, that help us take care of each other in community. But I'm also, if I'm honest with you, me personally, I am cracking up because white supremacy is not novel. Like patriarchy is not inventive. We all sat around in our group chats and predicted exactly what they were going to say. And lo and behold, they've been saying it. Like we knew that it was going to be you slept your way to the top. We knew that there was going to be attacks on the fact that she does not have any children that she birthed herself. Meanwhile, none of the other presidents who have ever come before her have ever given birth to children. So why do we care about it now?
Indeed. True.
Right? Like we knew that it was
Giving birth
going to
not a
be
prerequisite to being president.
period.
FYI.
And she is indeed a mother because stepchildren are her children. Her stepchildren are her children too.
Yes.
Right? Like we knew it was going to be about her intelligence. Meanwhile, she has proven time and again, just like Black women always do, that we're always twice as prepared and 3 times as ready to stand up. And the truth of the matter is, you want to cast her as dumb because you are completely unprepared to debate her. She's going to eat you up and spit you out.
If he shows up.
Right? I'm really hoping that she calls his bluff and she says, great, we can do Fox. We can do anytime, anywhere, because the message is going to be the same and the American people deserve to hear it. So I'm actually really finding it quite hilarious because y'all ain't got nothing better. Y'all could come up with something. Y'all over here chasing down Willie Brown like people don't have dating histories. Montel Williams already told you he's not interested in talking to y'all. So y'all gonna have to get more creative or something, but you won't because white supremacy and patriarchy are incapable of being creative.
Yes, I can see that you are amused. I also think, look, you talk about messaging. What about the messaging coming from Vice President Harris? I mean, just what a difference 4 years makes.
That's right.
Suddenly, this woman's prosecutor status is very fitting for this campaign, right? Prosecuting the case against former President Trump, who obviously is facing multiple, legal challenges on multiple fronts right now, right? And she says, I know Donald Trump's type, as a former prosecutor who has prosecuted people for the types of crimes that he has been accused and adjudicated for. We've already seen her be an effective messenger on, issues like abortion. But this prosecutor theme that she seems to really be hammering, we just heard it yesterday in the stump speech. We'll probably hear it again when she's out in Milwaukee, like prosecuting the case against President Trump in the court of public opinion, right? With the voters. That feels like something that could be pretty potent.
I agree. I think it's really important that the party threads a needle because one of the things that so many of us on the left of the aisle, whether you are a Democrat, progressive, leftist, whatever, have been championing is the restoration of voting rights for formerly incarcerated people, right? Because so many of those people, Aaron, look like you and I. And I think it's important that we don't ostracize and alienate the very people we've been trying to bring back into the fold. That said, I think what is been important about what she has been doing in particular as she messages this is that she's specifying the kind of activity that she's talking about. She's specifying that we're talking about sexual assault. She's specifying that we're talking about running scam for-profit colleges. She's specifying that we're talking about people who ran fraudulent banks that defrauded people out of their hard-earned money and life savings. She's specifying that we're talking about not just any old shoplifter, but a thief that tried to steal from the American people and watch his own vice president be lynched in the process, right? A thief who would happily send out his goons to intimidate Black women and elderly people and poll workers and election certifiers, that would send out his people to, kidnap their opponents, to kill their opponents, to drive us out of the country, right? She's talking about someone who sees seditious activity, traitorous activity, tyrannical activity, as just another day at the office. And that distinction, I think, has been very clear from her messaging in her mouth. And I think that distinction is one that the American people are really finding important. That if January the 6th was just a precursor, we cannot afford to see what the next chapter is supposed to look like in their mind. And that those are specifically the kind of crimes that the American people will not stand for and will not tolerate.
Yeah. Well, can we talk about Veepstakes? Let's talk about,
of course we can,
the VP's now hunt for her, potential VP on this ticket. I wrote a column earlier this week about who I think the Veep pick should be. TLDR, it's Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, even though she has said that she is not interested. There's still time. But my thinking is, if a Veep pick is supposed to bring value and balance to a ticket, Whitmer is an ideal fit for a number of reasons. You've got 2 women on the ballot. That draws a great contrast with this all-male ticket on the other side, especially during a year when women's rights are literally on the ballot, right? And Whitmer has proven that she can win over Rust Belt voters. That's a must-win region for the vice president. And you've got people saying that this is a group of voters that maybe, Harris won't be popular with. Look, bottom line, I think it's a great choice. Like I said, I know that she has said that she is not interested, but we're all not interested until we get asked, right? Nobody's asking me either. I'm also not interested. But conventional wisdom says, there needs to be a white man on the ticket. But I don't know that that's necessarily true this year. These are unprecedented times. Just to butcher that phrase one more time. This is not a primary, right? Like this, if this is the ticket.
This might be the one and only chance to prove, well, at least in our lifetimes, to prove to the American people that yes, not just one woman, but 2 women can actually do this much better.
Yeah.
I agree with you. If the whole thing is blown up anyway, then let's go for it, right? Yeah. If we're in uncharted territory, then let's go for it. But yeah, the prevailing wisdom is we're talking about a straight white milk toast, plays good in the American heartland, white man.
Yeah.
With 3.5 kids and a dog and a white picket fence in preferably a swing state, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there are pros and cons to all of the names that have been floated, right? Like we know that if we're talking about Senator Mark Kelly, that we're potentially opening up a seat in a critical Senate election, right? And that would have to be a special election. And if President Harris is going to be effective, she needs a Congress behind the work that she wants to do. Keeping the Senate blue and getting the House to be blue is an important and necessary win in the grand scheme of things, right? If we're talking about, Governor Andy Beshear, that's not necessarily a swing state, right? But he certainly brings things to the table. If we're talking about, a North Carolina governor, maybe we're putting that state in play. But it would be amazing to see, somebody in Democratic leadership read your fantastic piece in the 19th and say, let's put some polls out there and see how well this does. Let's actually at least just test this because maybe there's something to this. Listen, if Aaron Sorkin can think that this is the next season of The West Wing and write in Mitt Romney for the Democratic ticket, then we can throw out anything and hopefully be taken seriously.
I mean, apparently it's all on the table. It's all on the table.
All of it.
If conventional wisdom does win out, and I suspect it probably will, which white guy do we think is getting tapped for this job? I'm just saying.
Here's what I say, though. I think that ultimately, my hope is that the pick is somebody who understands what it means to support defend and back up a Black and South Asian woman in a position in which she's never been on the national stage. And so my hope is that it's somebody who is ready to be on board with her and to defend being on board with her at all times.
Yeah, no, you're making such a good point. I mean, I talk about this a lot too, just the idea that there's so few Americans, period, who have ever had a Black woman as the boss of everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what that potentially could model for the country, I think is also, I mean, it's beyond symbolism. It's potentially very, very powerful for us as a society. For a final thought, I will tell you, listening yesterday to the stop at the campaign office, the second gentleman's remarks reminded me of what a potentially powerful surrogate he could be. His love, not only for her, but the love that he expressed for the country, his admiration for President Biden. He is somebody who is very well liked. He is somebody who was already familiar with and comfortable on the campaign trail. I'm really thinking that he could be a significant factor in not only introducing her to the country, but also getting voters comfortable with the idea of this potentially history-making candidate. What do you think?
That's right. I think that you are absolutely on target. Look, I have been in social settings with the second gentleman when he was with her. And the kind of sense of responsibility he seems to show, not just as a husband, but as a partner in leadership with her in this history-making space that she already occupies as the first Black and South Asian woman to be vice president.
And he too also making history, right? He is making his own blueprint.
The first second gentleman as a Jewish second gentleman, right? That there are them as a blended family, right? There are lots of ways in which they are redefining for America what leadership looks like. I mean, thinking about the fact that her taking this position meant that there were several literal handbooks and rule books that had to be rewritten from the perspective and for the needs of a woman and a woman of color, and not a man in the VP seat and not a woman in the second spouse seat, is a reminder that the blueprint has already been rewritten. So them together and him as a powerful surrogate, certainly I think can help people, Americans, re-envision what is possible and what we can do when we come together, especially across lines of difference. I really, though, think that her special sauce, her most secret weapon, is her rootedness and her authenticity. I think that as she is more unleashed, I think that as she is not standing behind someone, but fully standing on her own, and as more and more people are telling the stories of their interactions with her, as more people get to actually touch her, hear her, get to know her very differently, I think that they will see somebody who really does work hard to not only honor her commitments, but honor everyday people. My own experiences with her as I've gotten to know her over the years have both been political and personal, right? She has called me when I was going through a difficult professional time. When my son was in the NICU, she called and wanted to speak to him and wanted to speak to myself and my husband to encourage us and tell us to keep going. And she's also reached out repeatedly for policy feedback. She's been doing that since I knew her in her Senate days, really wanting to dig into the details and say, well, how can we fix this? Or what do you think of this? And my promise to her, like so many other people who she interacts with in this way, was to always be honest, even at places where we disagree, even in places where I have critique. And I have watched her listen intently and welcome the critique, welcome the feedback, welcome the pushes. That is the kind of person that I want in charge. Not because they're perfect, not because every policy position of theirs matches every policy position of mine, but because they understand what public service is, that it is servant leadership, that you are of service to the people first. And I'm hopeful that kind of energy that she brings to so many spaces is seen more and more by the American people, so that they can not only trust her enough to vote for her, but be engaged enough to continue to raise their voices once she gets in office to make sure that the people's agenda is the agenda that she follows.
Yeah, well, I think that we are seeing a candidate that is so much more confident and comfortable in their skin than she was even 4 years ago, and it's something that she's really grown into over these 3.5 years as vice president. So listen, This was fun. We should do it again.
This was fun. We
Thank
should do
you.
it again.
Well, listen,
Thank
Brittany,
you.
thank you for hanging out on the amendment. This will not be the last time. Hopefully I'll be hanging out with you again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, friends. Thanks for all you do.
The Amendment is a co-production of the 19th News and Wonder Media Network. It is executive produced by Jenny Kaplan, Terry Rupar, and Faith Smith. Wonder Media Network's head of development is Emily Rutter. Julia B. Chan is the 19th's editor-in-chief. The Amendment is edited by Jenny Kaplan, Grace Lynch, and Emily Rutter. And it is produced by Grace Lynch, Brittany Martinez, and Taylor Williamson, with production assistance from Lucy Jones and post-production support from Julie Bogan, Victoria Clark, Lance Dixon, and Winton Wong. Artwork by Aria Goodman, and our theme music was composed by Jay Lynn. To wrap things up, I've got something exciting this year. Breaking the News, the documentary all about the early days of the 19th, is now available to stream on the PBS Documentaries Prime Video channel on Amazon. It's a really raw, really vulnerable, behind-the-curtains look at our newsroom. And you'll also get a glimpse of Ginger, my pride and joy Yorkie poo, and watch us navigate and learn from some of our early missteps as an organization. The film is also available to download on Amazon, Apple TV, iTunes, and Xfinity, or for those with a PBS Passport membership. For more information, head to 19thnews.org/breakingthenews. I really hope you like it.